A very good evening, one and all present here. I, Dr. Priyanka Varshney, on behalf of Global Learners Meet, an initiative of Varshney Teachers Group, greet and welcome you. It's a matter of great pride to share that we have covered a long journey now. We began in August 2020 and from then till now have successfully conducted 27 sessions. And today is the 28th session in this series of various interesting webinars. Like previous sessions, today also we have two eminent resource persons with us. We have Dr. Amit Ranjan from the School of International Politics and Department of Religious Studies, Florida International University, Miami, USA. Dr. Ranjan would be speaking on the topic John Lang, Interpolar, Moffusilite, and a General Historical Delight. As Dr. Ranjan is yet to join, I would also like to introduce our second speaker, Mr. Shirjeel Ahmad Siddiqui from Department of Agricultural Microbiology, Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh. Mr. Siddiqui would be speaking on antimicrobial resistance in the COVID-19 Epoch. After Mr. Siddiqui's talk, we would invite Dr. Ranjan and then we will have a brief round of question answer session and that would be followed by a formal vote of thanks. With such nice speakers and such interesting topics, without further delay, I would like to invite Gagan Gupta sir to please come and introduce our first speaker, Mr. Shirjeel Siddiqui. Thank you, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Priyanka. So today it's a matter of great privilege for me to invite our own alumnus, our own alma mater from Aligarh Muslim University, mine as well as Dr. Varshney Sahab, S.K. Varshney Sahab, alma mater. Shirjeel. So Shirjeel had his schooling from the schools of the Aligarh Muslim University. He pursued his bachelor's in biotechnology and master's in agricultural microbiology from Aligarh. During his MSc dissertation, Shirjeel isolated multiple drug-resistant, popularly called MDR, microorganisms from different sources of wastewater. These MDRs are found to be extended spectrum beta lactamase ESBL and carbapenemase producers. These ESBL and carbapenemase produce gram-negative bacilli, that is GNB infections. These infections are rather common among patients in intensive care units. So we like to listen whether this has something related with the ICU psychosis. Yes, however, these infections are nearly 25% to 5% seriousness respectively. After qualifying the prestigious National Educational Testing Examination, Shirjeel worked as project assistant at ICMR, NJIL and OMD Agra in a TB death audit project. Shirjeel had also handled courses on clinical microbiology and on infection prevention and control to paramedical students as a faculty member in Aligarh. Currently, Shirjeel is pursuing for his PhD program at the Aligarh Muslim University in a Department of Biotechnology, Government of India sponsored Indo-United Kingdom research project. He is now working to isolate, identify and characterize antimicrobial resistance, that is AMR, microorganisms from pharmaceutical effluents from different parts of India and United Kingdom. He has also participated in various national and international conferences. Shirjeel, an enthusiastic and young researcher, shall make us aware about these AMR resistance in COVID-19 epochs. Welcome, Shirjeel. It's now all yours. Please.
Thank you so much. Thank you, sir, for such a kind introduction. Kindly allow me to share the screen. I think I'm not the
Please, please,
presenter.
please. Shirjeel, make it full screen. Yes, that's true.
I hope it's visible now.
Yes, it's okay.
Thank you, sir, for such a kind introduction. And first, certainly, I would like to thank you and the entire Global Journalist Meet Group to give me this opportunity. And my warm regards to all the senior faculty members present here and the distinguished gathering. Today, I have come here not to present my views, but to interact and to aware about antimicrobial resistance in the present scenario of COVID-19. So let's start. These are the topics I would be covering. As we all are well aware that in December 2019, several cases of atypical pneumonia were reported from China. These cases were similar to that of SARS that was reported in 2003. The committee named it SARS-CoV-2, and on the 11th of February, WHO officially named the disease as COVID-19. This is something we all are aware about. Coronaviruses were the main agent responsible for spreading the disease. These are responsible for creating and spreading flu-like symptoms in the human. They are enveloped single-stranded viruses which have positive strand. And the current status of COVID-19 is like around 4.5 million deaths have been reported and 250 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 cases have been confirmed yet now. There is another pandemic which is having a veil, and that pandemic is none other than AMR, or the antimicrobial resistance. And this, the intensity of this pandemic or the silent pandemic has been manifold increased in the times of COVID-19. And one of the major reasons is that there has been no new development of the drug since 30 years. And this is creating a void in the development of therapeutic antimicrobial actions. These are some of the reports which states that, as it is visible, there have been various reports of the ICMR. This report is of 5th September 2019, which states that there has been a rise in the antimicrobial resistance in India. In another report, the first report, it is visible that the drug-resistant infections have been increased in the hospitals during the time of the pandemic. And the third report attached, it is of WHO report, in which it has been stated that we have to stop the COVID-19 pandemic to become an AMR catastrophe. So without taking much of the time, I should now focus on the antimicrobial resistance. It is a capacity of an organism to survive and grow at increased concentration of inhibitory agent. For example, just we can take the example from the common household examples. If we apply some sprays, insecticide sprays, earlier they used to be act against mosquitoes. Now the mosquitoes have become resistant against those sprays. Similarly, this example can be used for the microbes as well. The drugs which were earlier working and were having potency against the microbes now have stopped working because the microorganisms have become resistant. And the major reason of the resistance is they have been extensively used in the medical as well as non-medical sectors. They are used in the dairy industries, agricultural sectors. They are widely used in the pharmaceutical industries. The pharmaceutical discharge that is released in the water bodies, it meets the environment, and by that environment, AMR is spread throughout. The principle of AMR is very simple. Whenever stress conditions are created, for example, there has been a high concentration of antibiotic in an environment. So the organism which will be able to survive that antibiotic concentration will ultimately become the resistance and will pass on the resistance to the other microorganisms through various mechanisms. Whereas the one which will not able to survive will eventually die. This slide shows how does the antimicrobial resistance spread. On the daily basis, we use antimicrobial soaps, antibiotics in the treatment, disinfectants, antiseptics, sanitizers. What happens when we regularly use such agents? These proliferate the tendency for certain microbes to grow in the inhibited concentration, whereas the sensitive one are killed or inhibited by it. The one which grow are favored throughout the environment and they are passed on. And they, for example, in this case, it has been shown the hospital wastewater treatment system. As we are all aware, in the hospital system, a large number of antibiotics are given to the patients, plus their own waste excreta, whatever it is discharged in the water bodies. And when then water is released in the environment, it is mixed with the terrestrial and aquatic animals. It is also used as for irrigation purposes in the agricultural sectors, and also this water meets the groundwater. So what happens, the antimicrobial resistance organisms or the AMR, which were eventually in the hospital wastewater system, now has become the integral part of the whole environment, and they are spreading the resistance throughout. These are some of the mechanisms on a typical bacterium. Now let us discuss what are these mechanisms. The one is the First one is the horizontal gene transfer or the HGT. HGT is the mechanism typically which occurs in the bacterium in which the plasmid or the extra chromosomal DNA is transferred from one bacteria to the another, and the genes having the resistance are passed on to the population. For example, there are few population of the bacteria which are resistant to one type of antibiotic, let's say beta-lactam antibiotics. But when in an environment they meet other microorganisms, through the process of conjugation or the HGT, they transfer those genes to the another population. The other mechanisms are alteration in the membrane. Whenever a drug or an antimicrobial is subjected to an microorganism, there are some mechanisms by which that drug is eluted out of the body. Some other mechanisms include the efflux pump. Efflux pump is that mechanism in which there is a type of rotor or a pump. Whenever drug comes inside the body of a microorganism or the cell of a microorganism, it is efflux or propelled out. And there is various other mechanisms by which antibiotic resistance or the AMR or antimicrobial resistance is spread throughout. Now let's discuss the main topic, that is impact of COVID-19 on AMR. During the time of the COVID-19, many patients were given antimicrobials or the antibiotics specifically. They were for the two main reasons. The one is the bacterial pneumonia. The bacterial pneumonia has somewhat the same symptoms as that of COVID-19. But as the case in the emergencies, there were no tests were done. So in order to not to confuse with bacterial pneumonia, the patients were used to administered with the antibiotics. And in the another scenario, when the patients were hospitalized, whether in outpatient or in the ICU facilities, they were given the antibiotics to treat the secondary infections or the co-infections of the bacteria. In a recent study, it has been suggested that 93% of the patients, whether in the ICU or non-ICU, were given the antibiotics. In the same study, it was shown, this is a major point, in the same study, it was shown that only 10% of that patients were having secondary antibiotics. So basically, it was a misuse of the antibiotic, and that is ultimately a major reason for the spread of the AMR during the COVID times. So when antibiotics were administered to the patients, were having no secondary infections, but they eventually developed the multi-drug resistant infections. For example, the infections of the S. aureus or the methicillin resistant Staphylococcus aureus, or one is the most common case that we known as nosocomial infections. The nosocomial infections are those which are spread or which can be given through the hospital environment. So what was the scenario? The patient or the COVID patient was not having any co-infection, but when heavy doses of antibiotics were given, the body of the patient became resistant to certain infections that were present in the hospital. For example, the infections of Pseudomonas aeruginosa, which is associated with the pneumonia or the ventilator associated pneumonia. Similarly, certain lung infections of the fungus, which were even recently reported in the name of black fungus, white fungus, they all were result of a indiscriminate usage of the antimicrobials, antifungals, antibacterial. It is recommended by the WHO and other agencies to wash your hands on the regular basis to kill the viruses. But it has also certain limitation. When we use these sanitizers on a daily basis on high amount, there is a possibility that a virus or the bacteria agents that we are killing right now, they may become resistant to this type of alcohol or the hand-based sanitizers. So it can also originate in the drug resistance or the antimicrobial resistance if we use such antimicrobial products on the daily basis for a long period of time. So this is a very major point that should be noted. If we use the hand-based sanitizers for a prolonged time indiscriminately, it may also lead to the antimicrobial resistance. The major challenges for the AMR containment in the COVID-19 time was hospitals were overburdened with the patients, and as there was the only focus on the COVID-19 to treat is to make the remedies to treat and to find the possibilities of its existence, its research, and the ongoing work to curb the COVID-19. So in that mean of time, there was a deprioritization of global awareness of AMR and disruption in the policies. AMS is antimicrobial stewardship policies. Antimicrobial stewardship is that policy which gives the subjected the proper rules and regulation how and when to use the antibiotic or the antimicrobial agents in proper quantity and in proper manner. There was also disruption in the surveillance efforts of the antimicrobial resistance, and ultimately the research on the AMR was decelerated. These can be some of the measures or the remedy to combat antimicrobial resistance. The one is the increased collaboration. There is a need of to increase collaboration among the masses, among the researchers, among the stakeholders, to work on the collaborative manner. Rational drug use, as it is seen whenever we get ill or we have mild symptoms, we just use a self medication. We just go to the medical stores and take the antibiotics by our own without the doctor's prescription. And also it is seen that we do not follow the whole prescription or the procedure, but we stop the antibiotics whenever we feel we are okay. But this eventually lead to a system whenever we stop the antibiotics or the antimicrobial consumption during the time, so it may lead to the antimicrobial resistance because a sub-inhibitory concentration or a minimum concentration of the drug has been given to the microbes that are present in our body. So it may lead to the same mechanism of the AMR in the environment. Whenever minimum quantity of the drug is provided, the next time we use that drug, it may become resistant to those drugs when, for example, when the infection reoccurs. There is a need for infection control and prevention measures. We should ban on OTC or the over the counter antibiotics. There is a urgent need to antimicrobial surveillance, that how much antibiotics are being used and how are we using, are we justifying the use of antibiotic. We should educate and use the and motivate the masses among the proper usage of the antimicrobials. Moreover, there is a there is a need of R&D drug and vaccines. We should also focus on the immunization coverage in order to curb the COVID-19. The hand hygiene, as I said, it is a good measure or effective measure to contain AMR as well as COVID-19, but also it can also become the lagging point. There is a need to develop national policies. There is a need for making essential drug list, the drug list which should be used whenever infection is occurred. For example, there is a UTI infection, then specific class of drug should be used. Whenever there is lung infection, then specific class of drugs should be used and given. By overall, we can see we should move towards a One Health approach. What is One Health approach? It is a collaborative, multispectral approach. It is an interdisciplinary approach in which the common people, researchers, and stakeholders work on the local, regional, national, and global levels. The main goal is to achieve the proper health outcomes with the share between the animal, plants, environment, and ultimately it can benefit the human. The aim of the One Health approach is to design and implement programs, policies, legislation, and research in which multiple sectors can communicate. For example, when the researchers work on the COVID-19, they are only focusing on the COVID-19 and its impact. But what is the need? We need to work collaboratively on the other outcomes of the COVID-19. For example, we can see the phytocompounds action on the COVID-19. We can also focus on the antimicrobial resistance and the COVID-19 outcomes. So there is a need of a multidisciplinary approach in which so that a proper outcome can be delivered. And we should not go or opt for the one-dimensional approach. Human populations are growing and expanding, and in today's time, the humans are very much subjected to close contact with the wild domestic animals, livestock, as well as pets. So the gap between the animals and the humans, which used to be a larger gap in the past time, it has become now a close contact, and they share a proper environment. So what can it can lead to? The shared environment can lead the dissemination of the diseases between the animals and the humans, as well as close contact with the environment can also lead to the transmission of the drug resistance microbes, or what we know as multi-drug resistance microorganisms, through the contaminated food or by the animal saliva or other thing. So the One Health approach is the by far most only solution in which these problems can be contained by not only the working of a one sector, but multiple sectors can work in a coordinated manner to give a proper outcome. Conclusions. As we all know, the COVID-19 pandemic is highly interrelated, multi-sectoral. It is not limited to a particular environment, or even as far we don't know its origin, its existence, but we are highly working, the researchers are working to curb it. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a hidden threat of AMR, which was neglected in a manner, and AMR is jeopardizing the health in the many manners like societal and economical advancement. Moreover, there is a need for monitored of antibiotic stewardship programs, which can lead to the containment of COVID-19 and as well as AMR. The implementation of One Health approach can be the most appropriate measure to curb such havocs. The idea behind this presentation is to make us aware about, to make everyone aware about the COVID-19 and the impacts of the AMR. Antimicrobial resistance is basically a havoc which can be just turn into, as per the data of the WHO, it may result around 7 million deaths annually by 2050. So in order to curb all such measures, there is a need of proper jurisdiction and the awareness about antimicrobial resistance, and it is much needed in the times of COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirjeel ji. It was a wonderful talk. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, ma'am.
So, Shirjeel ji,
Thank you.
I would like to just give some key pointers to the participants. Please correct me if I'm wrong somewhere. So, sir, the key takeaways from your talk were meaning of AMR, that is antimicrobial resistance, how does it spread and the augmentation of selective pressure, impact of COVID 19 on AMR, COVID 19 challenges for AMR containment, how to combat AMR, and One Health approach. So, this was something which was covered in the talk. Gagan sir, kindly suggest should
Yes.
I go for the question answer session?
No, it seems that there is something wrong with Amit.
Okay.
Something different. I mean, he could not join. I have just received the message that there is some problem.
Okay.
So
So, sir, can we go ahead with the question answer
yes, let
round,
us go.
Shirjeel ji?
Let us go to the question answer session. If he is able to join, we will take it up later on. But there is some problem at Florida. Uh,
Okay. Okay. So,
Maybe we request Shirjeel to unshare the presentation so that we can see screen much better.
yes,
Sure, sir.
yes.
yes, sir.
And then we will have some question answer session, some
Yes,
understanding
sure, sir.
session. Yes.
So, Shirjeel ji, we can see many questions are there in the chat box. I'll be reading those questions for you to respond. So, I'll start with the question of SK Varshney sir. He has asked, what is the difference between MDR, that is multiple drug resistance, and AMR, antimicrobial resistance?
MDR, if we talk about MDR, the microorganisms, when we subject multiple drugs of the different classes, they become resistant to that. And if we talk about the antimicrobial resistance, it is a broader approach. It is not limited to the antimycotics, but also includes the use of biocides. When we use biocides on a daily basis, or the antiseptics, so when it becomes resistance, or even to the antifungals, antiparasitic drugs, so that collective approach is antimicrobial resistance. Whereas when we talking specifically about antibacterial or the antifungal, so those organisms which do not act against such drugs, they are termed as multi-drug resistance organisms. It is a for example, I would like to cite an example. It is a possibility that one organism, let's say an E. coli, is a multi-resistant organism, but it is not a possibility that particular strain is also a major cause of antimicrobial resistance in the global environment.
Okay, okay. Thank you, sir. I think I should read. There are many questions from SK Varshney, sir. So I will read all the questions from SK Varshney, sir, first, and then I will go to the other participants. So there is another question from SK Varshney, sir. In the initial phase of COVID treatment, when doctors were not aware about prescribed protocol of treatment, several drugs, including those used against TB, typhoid, malaria, etc., were tried. How could uncontrolled chemical accumulation in our body could affect AMR?
Uncontrolled chemical, exactly. This was that I was trying to convey. It is not, if we talk about the AMR, it is a broader approach. For example, let's say if a drug is being applied, if a fluconazole, I'm talking about a antifungal drug, and we have a normal flora in our body, E. coli, S. aureus, Malassezia. But even when fluconazoles or other chemicals are given in a larger quantity, the body becomes susceptible to those drugs. But when after a certain period of time, there is no action even to those drugs. So, whenever we have a fungal infection in another time, whenever fluconazole is administered, the normal flora present in our body, let's say E. coli or S. type is generally not normally present, E. coli, it will pass on that information from one gene to from one bacteria can pass on the information from to the fungus as well. So it is not a limited approach when we talk about AMR. On the other hand, when chemicals are being given, when we wash our hands with the ethanol, so there is a possibility that AMR can occur also. So chemicals directly or indirectly affect the AMR approach. I would also like to cite example of the heavy metals. The heavy metals are present in the environment, are known to proliferate the rate of antimicrobial resistance. The heavy metals like lead, mercury, when the microorganisms are able in that stress environment, they also become multi-drug resistance. So it's a overall approach where the many multiple factors are included, including the environmental factors as well as chemicals, selective pressures, stress conditions, climatic conditions as well.
True, true. Thank you, Shirjeel ji. One last question is there from SK Varshney sir. He's asking, have you tried a correlation between AMR and virus variant?
Actually, I have not tried the exact relation because this I've when I went through various literature surveys, this finding is still underway. But there is a larger possibility in the recent times that it can establish a much larger correlation on the aspects of the AMR and COVID-19. But yes, certain reports suggest that in some patients which were given antimicrobial drugs on in the indiscriminate manner, they died not due to COVID-19, but they died due to the infections of the AMR or the MDR. As I stated in the presentation, some even died due to the infections of the Pseudomonas aeruginosa or the PA, which is generally associated with the pneumonia or the ventilator associated pneumonia. So when what happened, they were not having initially co-infections, but when antimicrobial drugs were given to them in a higher amount, the Pseudomonas aeruginosa present in the environment became resistant to it, and in that and due to that environment, the patient died due to infections of the second Pseudomonas aeruginosa and not due to the COVID-19. So there are various reports and findings that prove that there is a correlation between COVID-19 and the AMR.
Thank you, sir. Um, I think SK Varshney sir has got all the answers. Now I think I should move towards the question of Gagan Gupta sir. This is question come observation, sir. So he is asking, it is being said the role of excessive use of steroids has resulted into black fungus. Please share your observation on this, sir.
Okay, plus excessive use of steroids. The excessive use of steroids has led to the black
Gagan
fungus.
Gupta sir, your mic is on. Thank you, sir. It is off now. Shirjeel ji, please go ahead.
Yes, yes. The excessive use of steroids has led to the black fungus. What ultimately happened in our body, it is the exactly the same thing. It is all related to the AMR and the proper environment. Whenever a particular drug or even an agent, that's why the difference between MDR and AMR. Even a particular agent, let's say particular type of steroid or even some supplements of iron are given in a larger quantity, so that ultimately leads to the evacuation of the normal flora. So whenever we have a mild infection in that environment, the susceptible or the virus or the fungus or the bacteria which is present in the environment, when it attacks and there is no normal flora, it gets the chance to infect and spread. So that has happened in the case of excessive use of steroids as well. The excessive use has led to disruption of the normal flora, and it has ultimately led to because the funguses were present, have been present from last many centuries, but as it was seen post COVID scenario, many people were suffering from different type of fungal infection. It is because various supplements were given to them, whether it in the form of steroids, whether the iron supplements or the excessive vitamin supplements. So that ultimately led to the favorable condition for the one type of microorganism and disfavorable condition for a larger population.
Shirjeel, it is being said that in the case of virus in particular, that there at one time there is only one virus. For example, when it was the time of COVID, coronavirus, SARS-2, there was no other virus. In United States, even the vaccine, which was the normal vaccine, which used to be given for the entire population, the influenza vaccine was not given this time. But now we are having the dengue, we are having the viral. So shall we assume that coronavirus has gone, at least for the moment? Can we assume that?
So it is a very debatable question. But if we talk about the viruses, their etiology, their etymology is not well defined. It is something, if we talk about, if we say, find the literature, it is something, the viral part, they are having the DNA particles, some have in the form of DNA, some have the RNA, and they keep on changing and mutating every time. But as far as it is concerned about COVID-19, whether it has gone or not, might be it has been in the environment in a reserved form, and sometimes when it finds suitable for it, the susceptible condition. For example, when we just avoid that the social distancing norms, it any condition can arise. Or for example, uh, in case of COVID-19 specifically, it has been assumed, it is not well defined or hypothesized, it has been assumed that it has been transferred from the bats. So it is a possibility whenever there's a favorable environment from COVID virus or the coronavirus come, it may again reoccur. And if it is concerned about the viruses of the vector borne diseases, so they are always in the environment. Even the during the last year, along with the COVID, there are various cases of dengue, there are various cases of other viral disease, even the gastrointestinal viral disease, which is very common, which we everyone ignores. We just thought it is some sort of uh, it is some sort of uncomfortable in the stomach or something like that. But they're all viral diseases which are self-limiting. Even one to 2 to 3 days, they are self-limited, and we do not take that much of care for that. So viruses exist in the nature as just like as we are, and it is well known that they are living inside the host only, and they're non-living outside the living body.
So good enough, good enough. I let's hope that uh, uh, the virus will not mutate further to the extent that it has gone through in the last few months, in last months and last 2 years. Uh, and in the meantime, it's good that we have developed good sanitation habits. We are in the habit of wearing masks, particularly when we are in crowd, or particularly when we are seeing somebody who is in flu or something some that. So uh, we have changed our habits to the extent. We all wish you very best, Shirjeel.
Thank you, sir.
Keep
Thank you so
on
much.
keep on doing good work, and yes, we look at you with a great hope. You are our own alma mater. So yes, please do come back to us as and when you want any kind of help which we can do.
Sure, sir. Definitely.
भाटिया साहब, इसको थोड़ा सा सुजील को थोड़ा सा आशीर्वाद दीजिए.
You see, लेक्चर तो बहुत अच्छा है और बहुत अच्छी इंफॉर्मेशन दी है, पर जब लाखों लोग एकदम अफेक्ट हो जाएं तो डॉक्टर तो बेचारे भी परेशान हो जाते हैं. सो दे मेड ए स्टैंडर्ड प्रोसीजर कि ये ड्रग्स दे दो, विच इंक्लूडेड ऑल काइंड्स ऑफ थिंग्स. And obviously, as he says rightly, we had the kind of effects that he's predicting. कि अगर आप unnecessarily steroids लोगे तो क्या होगा, unnecessarily antibiotics लोगे तो क्या होगा. I mean, but look at the doctors at that time. When the number of patients is so large, they cannot concentrate on individuals. So they have to find a sort of remedy for a whole population. At that time, they're helpless. But I think the information given to us now will help us in future, that if we fall ill, then we take care of the kind of things that he is saying, antimicrobial resistance. I think it's a very good lecture, very enlightening, and I wish to keep on working on this.
Thank you so much. Thank you, sir.
Shirjeel, you stay back with us. Probably we will have more questions to you at the end of this another talk.
I was just wondering, Shirjeel,
Yes.
apart from COVID, because COVID is one part of it, but AMR is a bigger disease.
Yes, sir, definitely.
So what could be the other possible threat, and how we can maintain a healthy lifestyle to avoid AMR occurrence?
In order to AMR, actually, it is a saying that everything starts at home. So what we can do for at our own level, the initial level, that we should stop consuming antibiotics by our own or prescribing self. We should avoid the self medication. on the global level, there is a urgent need to make the guidelines, antimicrobial stewardship guideline, that especially when we go to the doctor, there is a most common scenario when you go to the direct doctor, he says that try it for 2 to 3 days. If it does not work, come back to me. So it is actually a hit and trial method. So there is a need for diagnostic test, and only the proper medication should be prescribed. Then it can help to avoid this or curb this situation. Otherwise, there is no such hope that we will be able to overcome the situation. If I say it, because there has been a lot of data generated from the years, from the last 30 to 35 years, and even it has been predicted that by WHO by 2050 we could have around 7 million deaths per year, and by during this time of COVID-19, this whole frame shift has been done to 2030. So it is also, these are all research hypotheses, and I can say predictions also. But there is no there is a need for urgency guidelines, awareness at every level, from the individual level to the uh, pharmaceutical level, to the doctors level, to the researchers level, at the national level, policy makers. So there is a need to and collaborative approach should be there, so that we can just follow and adhere to that protocols.
I have a suggestion, Sajid.
Yes,
Uh, I hope you have seen books like, not books, magazines like Science Reporter. Have you seen?
yes, sir, yes.
So Science Reporter basically target two kind of audience: student of class 10 to 12, and also civil service aspirants. Okay, so it would be good if you could write for them, or I'm not saying you write for them only. Any magazine like that. What is AMR, and your what you discussed today about its association with COVID. I think young readers would be more interested to know about that, and it will also give you confidence before you start writing research papers.
Yes. In fact, Dr. Varshney, you might recall that at NCRT too, we have some journals which are UGC accredited in the list. So you can consider those popular journals like School Science, uh,
Definitely, sir.
Like,
like school Science,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
School Science. Yes. My department edits it. My department publishes it. In fact, so I will be sending you details. Don't worry.
Sure, sir. Thank you, sir.
So great,
So
Shirjeel and Gaganji. I would like to take leave at
yes,
this moment.
yes. No, yes. आपको जाना है. Well,
Ah,
it was nice being with you. So,
yeah,
we will discuss the Srivastav case little
sure.
later,
Yeah,
at some other time.
okay.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
So,
Bye for
thank you.
now.
Thank you,
Namaskar to
sir.
everyone.
So, namaskar, namaskar. So now we have Amit. Amit, are you here? Can we see you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, we need to see you. Yes, you are as smart.
Good evening, sir.
You
How
are
are you?
as smart as you are here in Delhi. So now you are sitting nearly. It is very early morning for you there.
Yeah, not
Yes.
very. It's 10 in the morning. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So, friends, today we have another session now from biotechnology to literature. Probably this is the USB of our forum where we discuss the issues of such diverse nature and at the same day, in the same session. So, today we have with us Amit Ranjan, my young friend. And yes, I am a great fan of Amit. I welcome you, Amit, once again here on the same forum. Uh,
Thank you so much, sir.
and in between, you would like to learn that we have started many other similar kind of activities, both at our personal forum, this forum, and as NCRT forum as well. You might be receiving those advertisements probably.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's also going on very successfully now. Our slots up to March are full.
Oh, very
This this
nice.
is this is an indicator of that we are doing good. So now, audience, let me introduce Amit to you once again. Amit is a poet and an academician. I'm a fan of Amit. Once again, I reiterate. Amit has recently written a book on journalist John Lang, a curious 19th century lawyer. This book has been released very recently. In fact, I am yet to get a copy of it. I had ordered it for it somewhere in July or in August. Uh, I am yet to receive it. This English author, John Lang, was a lawyer, famous lawyer, and was a lawyer of Rani Jhansi too. Amit's collection of poems, Find Me Leonard Cohen, I Am Almost 30, came out in 2018. Amit's other forthcoming books include a biography of Dara Shikoh, a new collection of poems, and an academic work on literature in colonial India. Amit studied at St. Stephen's College and Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi, and has been a visiting scholar at Florida State University, Miami nowadays. And he has also been a visiting scholar at University of New South Wales, Australia, Sydney. Amit has been a recipient of Fulbright Fellowship twice, as well as Inlex and Endeavour Fellowships. He is also dabbed in theatre and journalism, apart from teaching at various places. Currently, Amit Ranjan is a permanent faculty member in English at my place, that is National Council of Educational Research and Training, New Delhi. Welcome, Amit. We welcome you once again. Now it's all yours.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm grateful and very happy to be back on the VTG group. Last I was here talking about literature in March, I think. Yeah, that was.
Yeah, April.
Yeah, early April, right? First week of April. Yeah. So thank you very much, everyone, for coming here to listen to this little talk. So this book is called, I'll hold it up for you, John Lang, Wanderer of Hindustan, Slanderer in Hindustani, Lawyer for the Rani. And last time with the talk, I had done a little experiment of not including any PowerPoint to see how it goes, and it went well. So this time I'll do the same. Just talk for a brief while, and then we can have a little discussion. I had a bunch of pictures to show, but unfortunately that file is corrupt, so I needed a little more time. But yeah, whoever is interested, I can show you the pictures later, or I can share on the group. So anyway, this book's taken long time to come out, because like John Lang was lost for 100 years, the book was also struggling to find its right publisher for a while. Eventually, it's come out with New Yogi Books. And it's available largely online, offline in India, and overseas as well, mostly online. So John Lang is this very curious character. So mostly the way the book, let's say, is being marketed is that he was the lawyer of Rani of Jhansi. But I would say that's very reductive. That's the least he did in his life. The smallest thing that he did in his life was probably being the lawyer of Rani of Jhansi, which was only for about a week or a month in his career. So basically, John Lang is this Australian character who came to India in 1842 at the age of 26. So his time period is 1816 to 1864. And he came at the age of 26 in 1842 to India and lived here until 1864 till he died. In between also, he went to England also. but never went back to Australia. We'll come to reasons why he never went back to Australia. Even when his mother died, he did not go back to Australia. So, it's a very interesting character of Indian history, more than, let's say, British or Australian history, because he's completely invested in India. And so, as a lawyer, he studied law at Middle Temple in England, went back to Australia. Now, in Australia, there was this sort of caste system. So Australia was a convict colony built by the convicts. So there were free people controlling the convicts and the convicts. And the descendants of convicts had lesser rights than descendants of free people. Uh, so they were free people and currency lads or emancipists who wanted emancipation of um, people of convict origin. Lang was one of them. Even though he came from a wealthy family, his roots were still of convict origin in Australia. And so when he went back to Australia as a lawyer, as a young lawyer, and he started talking about these things, and he also started talking about detaching Australia from England, um, um, as also the rights of emancipist people. It was too early, I guess, in the 1840s to talk about these things, and he met with a very hostile atmosphere, and therefore sailed to India, where his brother-in-law was practicing as a judge at Calcutta High Court. And in India, he found perfect allies in Indians to sort of take on the British establishment, which he already despised with passion. And so the rest of his life is a pursuit of harassing the British government, the legal system, and the military in particular. And so his career is threefold. He was a journalist, ran a newspaper called the Moffusilite, which came out from Calcutta, later from Meerut and Agra. And was a novelist, wrote 23 novels, plus also wrote poetry, also a translator, translated lots of stuff from Persian to English, and vice versa also, but mostly was for his newspaper, which was in English, called the Moffusilite. And as a lawyer, interestingly, mostly he fought cases only of Indians against the British. I haven't really found any records of him fighting a case for a British man. So a very interesting, eccentric sort of a figure. And talking of these three careers separately, and then we can tie it all together. So as a lawyer, he fought the case of one Lala Jyoti Prasad in 1851. Lala Jyoti Prasad had given provisions to the British in the Anglo-Sikh Wars, 1840 to 1845, and supplied ration to the British Army. Instead of paying him up to a tune of 30 lakh rupees, the East India Company instead slapped a case of forgery on him. And so Lala Jyoti Prasad hired Lang as a lawyer, and Lang was probably in England at that point of time, and was also Lala Jyoti Prasad's guarantor, and some of his things were seized as well during a raid, which enraged him no end, and he came back to India to fight this case. So the case was fought in Meerut, and for a week, Lang just came and listened to the prosecution, did not say a word, just cooled his heels, made notes, and East India Company thought that they have an easy case at hand. This lawyer who is dumbfounded, is unable to speak something. And at the end of 7 days, Lang spoke just for a day and tore into the prosecution's arguments completely, point by point. And in a in a day or two, everybody knew that it was Lang who would win the case. So a night before the judgment was to be pronounced, there was a party, and this writer, writing in 1893, says that Lang was no teetotaler, and his favorite brand was John X. Shaw, favorite brand of whiskey, therefore. And so his friends asked him what he thought of the jury, and Lang said, "They are a bunch of damned sewers, pigs." And the friend said, "Oh, can you say this? You're drunk, so that's why you're saying this. Can you say this in the courtroom?" He said, "Of course I can say this in the courtroom." So the next day in the courtroom, Lang said that he had come aboard the ship called Nile from England to fight this case, and they were served rotten pork on the ship. And this part of the case, in which Lala Jyoti Prasad has been accused of forgery, stinks like the hind leg of the pig, and so on and so forth. So he pointed out to all jury members, one by one, equating them with pig's anatomy. And the judge advocate general was eventually was so ashamed that he said um, he was ashamed to be associated with the case at all. So Lang had won the case and the bet both. Um, and he got 3 lakh rupees, 10% for as fee for getting Lala Jyoti Prasad's money. Now, there's a very funny incident that follows this as well. Lang became a sort of a hero in upper provinces, what is now North India. And the Rani of Jhansi summoned him to be a lawyer for the doctrine of lapse case. Now, unfortunately, she lost that case very quickly. And there's some responsibility Lang also has in it, because the East India Company was determined to defeat him after this victory in the Lala Jyoti Prasad case. So the funny incident after this is that Lala Jyoti Prasad, apart from other things, also gifted him his gold brocaded portrait, and which Lang carried with him everywhere as a sign of good luck. So in 1857, when Nana Sahib was the leader of the revolution and became a villain in British imagination and a hero in Indian imagination, as the matter still remains, Lang was in England at that point of time, trying to further his literary career, and trying to match, let's say, Charles Dickens in his novel for novel, article for article, and so on and so forth. Charles Dickens wrote during the same period, and they were very good friends. Lang wrote for Charles Dickens. So anyway, Lang was in England, and they were looking for a picture of Nana Sahib. And these newspaper guys thought that this guy hangs around in India a lot and meets Indian nobility and all that. So he must have a picture. And so the illustrator from Illustrated London News went to him and saw this portrait of Lala Jyoti Prasad hanging on the wall, and assumed that it must be Nana Sahib since it's gold brocaded and so on. And so he said, "Is this Nana Sahib?" And John Lang said, "No, this guy resembles Nana Sahib only as much as you resemble the Queen." But the illustrator secretly was convinced that if it's a gold brocaded portrait of and looks like a person whose nobility, must be Nana Sahib, and so he went and had that picture engraved, and that is what got printed in Illustrated London News as Nana Sahib's picture. So Jyoti Prasad's picture passed off as Nana Sahib's picture, and that still goes down in many history books as Nana Sahib's picture. And so Nana Sahib's supporters were distraught that suddenly that the painter had painted him with a pot belly and he looked more like a Lala than a Nana. So of course we know the connotations of these honorifics. So the Nana had already had suddenly started looking like Lala, and Lala Jyoti Prasad himself was devastated because his picture had got printed and he was the most wanted person suddenly. And so John Lang had to, of course, avoid Lala Jyoti Prasad for a long time after that, after this prank was played, which Lang says was not deliberate on his part, but could well be deliberate on his part. He loved a good prank. And so these are some of the incidents from his legal career, um, which are very interesting and give a glimpse into. Also, we get a very different picture about 19th century, mid 19th century history um, from these sort of anecdotal sources. 19th century is very interesting because everybody was writing, soldiers, housewives, um, writers, non-writers, everybody wrote something. So we have a vast amount of anecdotal sources, which sort of mainstream history ignores, and so we miss a lot of picture. So, for example, staying on Nana Sahib, um, Lang visited him, and so Lang calls himself an interloper, or calls himself an interloper or a Moffusilite. Moffusilite means a small towner, an interloper. So he would travel to all these places um, to meet Indian princes and queens, and would not introduce himself as anything, not as the editor of Moffusilite or a writer or whatever. They would assume that he's a civil servant or a military officer and would offer him tremendous hospitality. And he'd stay there for a week, observe, write a piece or something. And so this is how he went to Nana Sahib as well. And he wasn't asked anything, but he was just offered great hospitality. And he says for 1 week he was shampooed. So champi is the word that became shampoo in English because the British could not pronounce champi. So 1 week he got shampooed well and all kinds of pampering. Um, Smoked cheroot with Nana Sahib, etc. So there's all kinds of description he gives for a week. At the end of it, Nana Sahib gets a letter of recommendation, or rather a character certificate by John Lang. And Lang says that Nana Sahib had 150 such character certificates from British people who had visited him. And this sort of tells us the whole history of this business of character certificates, which we still dwell on for our college admissions and things like that, also letters of recommendation. So these are from deep within colonial histories, which are quirky things, and we don't know why they exist. Get a sort of a very interesting glimpse into it. And also, Nana Sahib was very fond of, let's say, European artifacts, furniture, mats, etc., wine, and so these. Of course, he's painted very differently as somebody who's a born nationalist. But when we read Lang, one is able to contextualize that kingship is not really is not really let's say people centric or nationalist a priori. That it's the context which makes it so. And so it's a very interesting way of looking at things around 1857. Lang's anecdotes about the period and his meetings with such people. So that's a glimpse into Lang's career as a lawyer. As a novelist, also, he's very interesting. Most of his novels are set in India. And like I said, 20 odd novels. And there are roughly three things that he does: lampooning the military, lampooning the legal system, and being a feminist. These are the three sort of things that Lang does, and which is very interesting that he criticized the military so much, and his subscribers of his newspaper Moffusilite were largely military people. So it was a feat that he achieved. And how achieved that feat was by writing novels in his newspaper, serialized novels, which were about women and had leading protagonists as women. And so the housewives of military officers would buy this newspaper. And so the subscription was huge. Actually, he made a lot of money out of his newspaper. And he would, from those very housewives, get all the military gossip and publish it in the newspaper, much to the chagrin of military generals and so on and so forth. Uh, but a very intrepid, brave man to directly be able to criticize his patrons. And legal system he knew inside out, so he'd do that as well within his novels. So some very his novels are very witty as well, very funny. So, for example, in the Weatherbees, he talks about a certain person being of a high rank in military, and he says, "Oh, such and such person is not a colonel because he has talent or he's brave, but because all his seniors have um, died to cholera." And so this happened a lot. Everybody died of cholera or malaria in India, and so people would get promotions like that, and he really makes fun of the British Army that way. Also, the wives had to vacate barracks if their husbands died, and so in that anxiety, if anybody's husband died, they immediately remarried somebody. And so there are these funny situations in his novels where um, a battalion has been killed, and the wives quickly remarry, and all the people uh, who are allegedly dead come back, and then there's a duel between the new husbands and the old husbands, and things like that. So he makes a parody of this, and also of court martials, also of the legal system. He shows how tedious the entire legal system in India is, and how there's so much paperwork involved. How the British judges did not trust native witnesses, and so everything was in writing, which stays with us even till date when we say "लिख के ले लो" या "लिख के दे दूंगा" and so on and so forth. Where does it come from? It comes from uh, colonial legal system where every small thing had to be written down, and writing was the only the matter of trust. Otherwise, there's no reason why, if I tell somebody something or write something and give it to that person, there should be a different level of trust. And so this also has roots in colonial history. Other aspect I was talking about was um, a strand of a strong strand of feminism in his work. Um, so it's now one from our vantage position today, one may not understand um, uh, how difficult it would be in 1850s for any writer, man or woman, to be, let's say, overtly feminist. Women were writing under pseudonyms or anonymously, and men barely wrote about women except as ornaments. Uh, Ornaments, both in, let's say, decorative sense and in a prop sense for the plot. But Lang's protagonist, and as I already pointed out, why? Because it was women who were his clientele, and so he was very happy to write about them. And so, for example, in one of the novels, there's a divorced lady um, who's living with a bachelor man as a tenant in her house, which is sort of uh, outrageous um, at that point of time. And for example, he parodies Jane Austen's novel, uh, Pride and Prejudice, in which there are three girls and three men with a little twist. Most of Jane Austen's novels are like that. about the countryside, and eventually they get married and so on and so forth. In John Lang's novel, he takes the same characters and completely flips it, where three men who dress when they dress in the calendar dress. Now, calendar here is actually kalandar, and they dress like kalandars. They look alike, and so there are three sisters and three men. But the eldest sister falls in love with all the three because they look alike when they wear the calendar dress. And all the three also fall in love back with her. So, very funny situation he creates and sends, as usual, sends one character to India and Indian military to make fun of Indian military and so on and so forth. So, um, so very interesting experiments. And no wonder that the British critics completely castigated him, cast him aside as well, and said that he was a hospital bed novelist, that he could paint only a sick picture of the empire. And because the British critics ignored him, he sort of got lost um, for a good 100 years. So he died in 1864. Maybe he was known till the first decade of 20th century, and then he was lost for about 100 years with minor cursory interest in him here and there. And so I found him in 2006, 7, roughly, in some other search while I was looking for something else. Because I was looking for this girl called Alice Richmond, whose grave is in Pune University. And because her grave is in Pune University, it leads to a lot of myths and folklore. She was in love with an Indian boy, they committed suicide. Um, that a ghost haunts the campus, things like that. And so I got very curious and interested in her. And basically, she was from South Australia, Melrose. That's what is written on her gravestone. And that she also died of cholera. So everything is sort of mentioned, but still there are all these urban legends around her. So I got very interested, and there was no way to find out about her. And so I started looking up what Australians were doing in India. And they were doing very, very interesting things. And so I stumbled upon John Lang. And talking of John Lang and feminism in Australia, there's something very interesting that also I came across during this time, which is that the Australian girls were very wild according to the Victorian standards. And so they had to be sent back home, which means sent to England for finishing school. And therefore, this discipline called home science today, which was to groom girls into becoming good wives, good cooks, and so on and so forth. So these Australian girls were sent to England for finishing school, and they would go through Colombo or Bombay. Of course, you had to go by ship, and there many of these girls would run off with wealthy Indians, get married or have affairs, whatever. And so this is also a separate book in itself, waiting to be born at some point of time. There are some on specific characters who married Indian princes. There are at least 3 Melbourne girls who married Indian princes. But what also happened, the other way to tame these girls apart from these finishing schools was to send them into seminaries, make them nuns for a while. And so the South Australia Baptist Mission, many of these girls were put into that to come as missionaries to India. And so South Australian Baptist Mission was full of women. So at one recorded meeting that I know of, 160 people attended, out of which 155 were women and 5 were men, primarily to tame them. And so suddenly you see in Bengal, this was the mission was largely in Pune and Bengal, and suddenly we see in Bengal, because these women had access to the zanana and not with men. Of course, the British would not want that these girls interact with Indian men. They would that would, of course, they'd run away according to the British. And so suddenly we see Bengali girls in Dhaka and what is now Bangladesh suddenly learning English, courtesy these girls who had come as part of South Australian Baptist Mission. And so there's this very curious late 19th century phenomena of Muslim girls learning English in East Bengal, and as a product of which we see this very interesting novella in English called uh, Sultana's Dream by F.K. Khatun, which is fascinating even for today. In all terms, sort of a feminist science fiction where there are no roads and there are only flying machines. Men have given themselves up. Um, I think there's somebody's mic is on, so there's a lot of disturbance. Yeah.
Amit, can you wind up?
Yes, sure.
Oh, please, please.
Um, so there's a very interesting novel called Sultana's Dream, where men have locked themselves in. They have given up power to women because they were not able to fight wars, and women do not fight wars with weapons, but by deflecting um, sunlight on a concave lens onto the enemy. And they work only 2 hours as opposed to 8 hours of men, because men used to waste all the time um, smoking tobacco and gossiping. And women are much more efficient, they can accomplish the work in 2 hours. This is just an example of the kind of boisterous nature of the um, Australian women who Lang was very influenced with. And that also reflects in his fiction and journalism. So, all in all, it's a very curious, colorful character, and who had a very successful career, both as a lawyer and as a journalist. Not as much successful as a writer as he would have wanted, and primarily saw himself as a writer. And unfortunately, he's lost to all the three places that he belongs to: Australia, India, and England. England is obvious because he criticized East India Company no end, harassed every governor general that came to India, and mm, and Australia because he did not spend much time over there. And there also, what he writes is in sympathy with the convicts, and which the free people of Australia, who had the power at that point of time, would not like. And India, who should remember him most, also forgot him because of his, let's say, outrageous nature, and was almost an alcoholic, and had girlfriends. So probably it does not fit into, and also was divorced. So it probably does not fit into the imagination in a nationalistic sort of a scheme. So he's lost to all three places that he belongs to. So thank you very much. That's a brief introduction to John Lang. And if
Thank you, Amit, for today. I could see another analogy to home science. Very beautiful, very interesting, interesting. And then another was chumpy to shampoo. I
right.
never knew that this word has gone from India. The word shampoo has gone from India, from Indian
Yes.
background. I never learned it, but I was thinking that few good examples of going from Hindi or from North Indian words to charpa, mayhem,
Yeah.
and many more other words of similar kind.
Epoch. Yeah.
Yes, yes, you are right. Many others. Uh, for me, I am a student. I am a typical student of science. I do not understand much about the linguistics, and but I was enjoying listening to you as always been. I don't have any question. Uh, I don't know whether Priyanka, can you take it over? Yes,
Yes, sir.
Priyanka.
I'll ask if somebody has question. So I invite the questions and your observations. If you want to share something, if you want to ask something to sir.
Yes, Mridula ji, please.
Uh, can I say something?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Please say.
I had really enjoyed reading this book, and though it's a very voluminous book, I read it non-stop. And towards the end, I wrote to Amit also that Amit sort of, it's like excavating. When you excavate something and try to find old material, old items you keep on going over it again and again. So he has the same style. He says something about Lang once, about what he did in the court. Then he says it again, and he says it again, and each time it is embellished. A little more information is added. So this is a very unique style of writing, I feel. And normally one won't do it in a novel, because it's very difficult to capture people's attention when you are repetitive. But what happens here is that this repetition each time gives you something new. So in a way, you are excavating. Now, for that, you have to be a very sort of a very mm, uh, inquisitive reader. You have to be as inquisitive as the writer, and you have to be ready to be told the same thing over and over again, and then find new things in it. But after a while, I really started enjoying this technique. Though I must say that towards the end of the book, maybe I was in a hurry, but I did feel that I wish the writer would hurry up, and not really test our patience by telling us about Lang again and again. Though, the wit of Lang's wit, it is a wonder that he remained unnoticed for so long. For somebody with that kind of wit, I mean, they're always outrageous, aren't they? Witty people.
Yeah.
They never fit into any mold. And I mean, our vidusha, जो हमारे विदूषक होते थे, yeah, the court jesters in Shakespeare, the jester in Shakespeare, or the vidushak in the Sanskrit plays, he was always outrageous. He said things which were rude, insulting to the king, and they put up with it only because of the wit.
Right.
It's not only Birbal who did that. It was done all the time in all the Sanskrit plays. So with that kind of wit that Lang had, I sometimes wonder why he still remained totally unknown, or he was deliberately ignored. He was not really unknown. He was deliberately ignored. Of course,
Yeah.
Amit has explained how he didn't fit in either. England, of course, they were very straight-laced. So you don't expect them to really appreciate being laughed at. Australia, I really know nothing about. But India, I think our kings were quite used to being laughed at. It is only the democratic setup which came later, which refused to be made fun of. But the kings were used to it. And in the Riyasats, particularly, the kings were quite used to having these vidushaks make fun of them. But apparently, I mean, he was not an Indian, and he was a Britisher, and he was really an Australian. But we tend to look upon on all white people as British or English. And so he really had no right to laugh at us. That could be one reason. But I will always feel that maybe this is the fate of not only John Lang, but even today, the fate of all people, all writers, women particularly, who don't fit in a mold. And I find myself falling in the same place. Thank you, Amit.
Uh,
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mridula ji, but I tend to disagree at some points with you, ma'am. Please forgive me for showing my disagreement. At some points, see, in India too, even in this democratic system, you recall Nehru ji inaugurated Shankar's gallery.
Yes, yes, yes,
Nehru ji inaugurated. Remember
yes.
R.K. Lakshman. Remember Telang. Uh, uh, yes, and secondly, uh, India has been saying Vasudev Kutumbakam. So we are okay with it, that if a foreigner is making fun of us, so we are okay with it. There is no problem, absolutely no problem. And Midraji, it was nice listening to you as well. And thank you, thank you very much for being a part of this forum too. Would like to listen you sometime later
Thank you.
on this forum again. I will get your. I hope Amit has your contact numbers, etc.
Yes,
So
yes.
I will take all those. You'll be listening to again. Uh, I hope you will not mind my disagreeing with you at some points.
No, no. Actually, I was
Yes,
Nehru. Nehru was my contemporary, and when I was in college, I have number of photographs and things with him. Met him
yes.
number of times with my father. He was the
That's
only person who allowed people to laugh at.
no. Even Atal Bihari also.
Atal Bihari, yes, but
Even
most
Atal.
people, but I mean, imagine Morarji Desai.
Oh,
Would
Morarji
anybody
Desai
laugh
was
at him?
different. Uh,
Not at all.
for that matter,
Not at all.
Indira. For that
Can
matter, Indira.
anybody laugh at Narendra Modi?
No, for that matter,
Can anybody
Indira.
laugh at Amit Shah? No,
But
no,
peop-
no, not
but
at all.
but
Patel won't allow a single smile to cross a person's face.
but
It
we
was
have been
Nehru
saying
who asked R.K. Lakshman, why
yes.
have you stopped making cartoons of me? Why are you treating
Yes,
me with contempt?
yes.
Why don't you make more cartoons of me, but not other people?
This,
Excuse me, I have known all these luminaries quite closely.
you are right,
At my age,
but
I mean, they
even
were
but
my contemporaries.
even with Manmohan Singh, you remember that we have been saying that this Sardar is now a Sardar. So I mean, even there are numerous examples even in this democratic India, this democratic
Okay,
situation.
okay. I
Yes.
mean, if you've added little to my knowledge, I
No,
remember
no, no. I mean, you
Manmohan
already
Singh
know
saying
it.
to
You
me
already know it,
at
ma'am.
one
No, it's
time,
not that. It's not
Manmohan
that
Singh
brackets.
told me they're sending me for this to this conference to talk about human rights. Now, what do I know about human rights?
Yes, you know, yes,
Huh.
yes.
I said,
He was
Manmohan
correct.
ji, you're not supposed to say that. So, like that, he was very light-hearted till he became the prime minister, poor thing. As long as he was the finance minister, he was fine.
I
When
remember
prime
having met him.
ministership was imposed upon him,
Yes,
he just didn't know what to do with
I
it.
remember having met him while he was the UGC chairman in New Delhi, early 90s. And VP Singh used to be his secretary at that time, VP Singh from Roorkee. And I remember having listened their conversation. Both of them were cracking jokes on themselves. Yes. Anyway, Priyanka ji, please wind up.
Thank you. So I'll
Thank you,
take
sir.
leave.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, I think, sir, I have seen this question. It has come
Yes,
from Vandana Luthra, ma'am.
yes,
Can I
please.
read it?
Please, please.
Sure.
So, this is for Amit Ranjan, sir. She's saying, very nice. What inspired you to author this book? I have not read this book, but would certainly do. What message you wish to convey through it? This is what she's asking.
Sure. First of all, thanks a lot, Mridula ma'am, for your very incisive comments, and also this whole thing about excavation. I had not thought as a reader about that, about the whole excavation part of it and how it works. So of course, only a reader can tell that. Thank you for that. So what inspired me to write this book is the character of John Lang himself. It's sort of a golden mine for me, because he's written so much about this period. And it's a very unique way of looking at events around 1857. Also, um, as a literature student, his literature is stellar, is witty, and also tied to all the literary scene of 19th century, which forms a sort of bedrock of modern literature, as well as Hindustani literature. Um, and so, because he's primarily so witty and outrageous, is what interested me. His volumes that he's written and waiting to be read and analyzed. So this is the reason why I went. And what's the message? Um, the message is to is first in his journalism that he was not in democracy. He was serving the East India Company and the British Crown after 1857, but he did not shy from saying what he wanted to. So at one point of time, um, Lord Harding summoned him and said, "Why do you write against me practically every day?" And Lang said, "My lord, did you come to make money in India?" And Lord Harding said, "Of course, I'm a poor man." Lang said, "Well, you can imagine I'm poorer than you, so I need more money than you. And if I can make money by writing against you, why should I write for you?" And Lord Harding liked this reply, called him as a guest to Shimla thereafter. And so the message is the kind of um, uh, strength, moral strength that this character had, or an ethical stand that he had against the empire. And he would stretch himself. He also went to jail for a brief while, and yet he was not a revolutionary in that sense. He had a good life, made a lot of money, but as a journalist, he was very committed to what he wanted to say and would not budge. And this is serving the Queen, not in a democracy. So, journalists and democracy can take a lesson or two from him. And of course, as a learner, as somebody seeking knowledge, his thirst, his hunger for knowledge is tremendous, which something which all students can take away from him.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for your response. And there is a thanks from Vanna ma'am side also. Thanks for providing enriching information with historical perspective. So this is what she's saying. Gagan sir, kindly guide. Should we move towards the formal vote of thanks? Sir, your mic is on mute.
Oh, sorry. Please,
Okay.
Priyanka ji, please.
Thank you, sir. So,
Just Shirjeel, is Shirjeel there?
yes, he's here.
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Shirjeel, as a later thought, probably we need to define the One Health word in probably a little more elaborative way. Probably this is just an advice. This is just a suggestion. The word One Health is used in different contexts.
Yes, sir, definitely. Yes, sir.
In different contexts. So, but probably your point was, if to my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, that One Health, you mean that you be careful while eating, be careful while taking any medicine, and doing any uh, activity which gives any chemical reaction to the body, etc. This is what I believe in. Am I right, Shujin?
No, sir. Actually, I use in the context as per the guidelines and definitions of CDC and WHO.
I
What
see.
actually One Health approach is to a multi-sectoral approach in which we also keep in mind the health of the animals, the plants, and your environment, and the humans always. So
Okay.
that interconnected relations between them is to be explored as much as we can, so that we can just find the connecting link. Just for example, in COVID, it is not well established whether it has been transmitted from bat or not. It is still a debatable question. So if there will be proper research on the One Health approach, so that will be easier for us, even for various diseases, in for the diseases of the microorganisms as well.
I understand. Priyanka ji, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So, on behalf of Global Learners Meet, I would like to thank Dr. Ranjan and Mr. Siddiqui for taking their time out and share their knowledge with all of us. This was simply amazing to listen both our speaker today. Once again, thank you, Dr. Ranjan and Mr. Siddiqui, for the wonderful session.
Thank you.
A special thanks goes to Dr. Gogan Gupta sir also for organizing such wonderful talks every time.
Now, next is on 20th of November.
Yes, sir. I'll just share after that, sir. I'll just share the poster after this.
Please.
So at the end, I would also like to thank all our participants for their active participation and making the webinar a success. Thank you all. Thank you once again. With this, we wind up today's session with the eagerness and curiosity to meet next time and learn some new topic. And I'll be sharing the poster of the event. And just give me a moment so that we come to know about the entire information.